So, Amaka, did you see that story about the British Museum loaning back Ghana's crown jewels to Ghana 150 years after looting them from the Ashanti king?
Well, I think it's actually they're loaning back to the Ashanti kingdom,
Okay.
as opposed to Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I remember seeing on the news. I mean, it's interesting that it's loaning back as opposed to returning.
Absolutely.
Because obviously that implies some sort of guilt. And I think museums these days just see themselves as sort of benign institutions that just happen to have this stuff, and are kind of presenting it for the benefit of the human race. And don't see themselves as culpable in any way, I don't think.
No, I think they're just terrified that so much will leave the museums. Exactly, it'll be empty. What are they going to do? It's a real problem.
I know.
So the best they can do is try to arrange some kind of loan deal.
System. Yeah, do you think there'll be a fine for late returns?
Exactly.
But the funny thing is they haven't said how long it's going to be loaned for.
I think it's 3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Okay.
Renewable.
Not 150 years.
3 years renewable.
Indefinitely.
For something that was yours.
That was yours, yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting, though, as well, that, there was a lot of looting by a lot of, kingdoms within Africa as well, looting from one place to another, spoils of war.
Absolutely.
I think it will probably open a kettle of worms that
completely
the world
who is the actual owner?
Who is the actual owner? And,
absolutely.
I do think it would have repercussions for museums all around the world, to be honest, not just the British Museum. I think a lot of museums around the world have things that have been, bought in kind of dubious ways.
Yes. Yes, so that's another entanglement from the age of exploration, or should I say the colonial era. And the looters won't have been far different from the expedition party portrayed in Tarzan the Ape Man. In part one of our two-parter, the parties now cleared the Mutia escarpment, the biggest hurdle to finding the elephant graveyard and striking it rich. But now things are going to take another twist. So Tarzan swings through the trees and kidnaps Jane and takes her to his home, which is basically an ape family.
You mean like men in ape suits family?
Yeah, the men in ape suits family. Then there's a truly terrifying scene between Tarzan and Jane. I think the subtext here is really disturbing. Basically, how I read it, Tarzan, this man, European man, who's found an ape family, is out in Africa. He's so sexually frustrated, but that he's never acted on his urge until he sees this white woman. And that's why he kidnaps her. But it's really terrifying. I can't work out what was happening. Was he going to rape her? I mean, I didn't understand that bit.
I think that it's stilted, isn't it? So
it's really
it's almost
stilted.
like both actors weren't quite sure when to, so it's like hold that position for, they just kept holding, and I suppose it implies some sort of tension, but it's
tension.
It's hard to really identify. But I think the assumption is that, that he will. She's afraid that maybe he's going to pull her into his
the nest,
and rape her. I think that's what that's about. But the way they've set him up, Tarzan doesn't appear in the story for quite some time, does he?
I think it's halfway through that he properly appears.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, exactly. So you don't really set Tarzan up. You don't know what his well, his life is just these apes. You assume. I remember hearing, when he does a cry and they're kind of wondering what that cry is, and even the locals don't know what that is. So it feels like Tarzan hasn't actually had any human connection.
Absolutely.
But I know from what I know of the books is that Tarzan, the people, the African people, are aware of his existence, and he's aware of theirs, and they have a kind of combative relationship, but they are very aware of each other.
Okay.
But the sexual side of things, there is no, in this film, there is, he doesn't meet any other woman.
Okay.
We don't know if he's met a woman before.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask. Why is it in this movie, and for Tarzan, why hasn't he ever had African friends, let alone an African girlfriend? Why?
I think, well, the way the film is, it's very, it's very simplistic. That would add another layer of complexity, I think, to the situation. And also it means that there would be some sort of, to get him and Jane together would mean that you'd have to do more with the story. And it's just simpler if
you'd have to dump the African girlfriend and go and kidnap
her. Or like a good African man, he would just have them all.
Exactly. So, but absolutely. Sorry. So we have to.
Yeah, he would. I think that would. It's just simplifying it. It's just it's simple storytelling for audiences, and it's not a film that is trying to provide any psychological kind of insight.
Yeah, and also the other thing to remember is that at this time in the 1930s, when this film was made, it was still illegal in the US to marry across races. And basically the miscegenation laws they were only repealed, I think, in 1967. So I think that would have been highly taboo.
Yes.
If
Tarzan
was
with
exactly
of having a relationship with anybody, and the only unless there were other white women stranded in the forest,
absolutely, yeah.
Jane is the only one. But I think wasn't one of the first interracial kisses like Star Trek or something?
Something like that.
With
that's like 1960s.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's just and also must remember that this slavery was abolished in America. I think it was sort of written into law in like 1867 or something like that. So we're talking about 65 years or so between then and when this is made. And these those kind of society's kind of beliefs don't just change.
No, they don't. And that also explains why he doesn't have a comfortable relationship with all the African tribes.
No.
So his only friends can be the ape family.
Yes, they yes, absolutely. Yeah, because he can't be seen to be on the same level.
Exactly.
As these Inhumans.
Exactly. Exactly. So the other thing that puzzled me that it is really the erasure of African women generally. Like so, you have just a small clip of them in that People's Safari in part one, but it occurred to me that in the 1930s there were still a lot of African tribes who where nakedness was not a taboo. And so a lot of women will have been topless. And so if you're staying really, really, really true to the authentic way that Africa was in earlier times, not all tribes covered themselves. They maybe just covered midriff, but not their top half. Yeah. So that would have been a problem in the 1930s filming that. So they just easier way, just get rid of it altogether.
Absolutely, because I mean, in the Western world, the female body's just sexualized.
Yeah,
as soon as you see anything,
yeah,
it's must mean a woman is sort of sexually available in some way. And, and you wouldn't, especially as we've just talked about, the kind of the abolition of slavery, the kind of the laws about marriage and the way that black women are seen, you don't want to put them on screen in any way that sort of indicates that they might be sexually attractive.
Exactly.
In some way.
So this just was eliminated from the...
Yeah, it's just, they are just these kind of strange beings, in the backdrop.
Just erased.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jane is finally rescued by the expedition party. And at the same time, one of Tarzan's ape families killed in the struggle. And there's a very, very insightful conversation she has with her father. I think that once you understand this, it cracks open the whole way Africans are viewed in this film. So let's have a listen to it.
I thought he was a savage. And I find out he wasn't. That's all.
I can't make it out. How did he get here?
Oh, what does it matter? He's happy, and at least he was until... Oh, Father, did you hear his cry when that ape was shot? He'd probably never been unhappy before.
Oh, my dear, he's not like us.
He's white.
Oh, whether they're white or not, those people living a life like that, they've no emotions. Hardly human.
Human. He's human, all right.
Mm-hmm. So do you think this scene makes more sense if you think of Tarzan as a black man?
I don't know.
Those people.
Well, I think it's that whole thing about civilization, isn't it? He must be like one of them because he's not been educated. He's not been. I mean, I don't know. I don't. I think it makes sense to me as it is. I didn't.
But what I'm saying is Tarzan a foil of to talk about Africans? Because that bit when he's saying whether white or not, those people living a life like that, i.e. out in the trees or in huts, they have no emotions, hardly human.
But I think it's setting up something where we're going to be able to differentiate him and have that sort of that theme of superiority, of racial superiority. If on the first instance they're seeing him as just like everybody else, who's kind of like uneducated, ignorant, bestial, and then Jane is the one who's sort of uncovering that actually, he's more than that. So I kind of felt like that scene was sort of setting him up to be seen as different down the line through the actions that we see.
Okay. I also feel that it's even then it's probably uncomfortable to be so on the nose to say that the African people are basically savages. Definitely he's been lined up as a noble savage as opposed to the
regular
Africans.
Savages.
But nonetheless, he's been portrayed, Tarzan, as something similar to them, someone who only wears a loincloth, someone not civilized.
Yeah.
And that's a way to talk about the real savages, the Africans.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Do you mean in a more sort of palatable way?
Exactly. So in a way that you don't have to say really...
you're not seen overtly being completely racist.
Yes.
But yeah, I suppose, yeah, I mean, it does, their opinions, yes, they are reflecting through their discussion of him.
Yeah, because who are those people?
Those people.
Because he remember, he has an ape family.
He does. Is he talking about them as well?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. But I think it's also reflects the worldviews in 1932.
But I think at that point though, we've seen what Jane has seen, haven't we, of him? So we know that he is different.
Yeah.
as an audience. We already know. So what his dad, what her father hasn't seen is, is what we've seen of him, that we know he's not, like what he's saying he is. Yeah,
but remember there's also the whole eugenics theory kind of thinking going on behind in the background, where lots of people believe it at this time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to even have, Holocaust in a few years' time and stuff like that. So that there's gradations of who is at the top of the racial chain and who is at the bottom. And also at the same time, although slavery or enslavement of Black African people has been abolished, that there is still racial segregation. And so that's the other thing that's going on that probably affects the writing of these scenes.
That is probably true.
But
I also feel at the end of that scene, we're very much into seeing Jane's attraction.
She's really physically attracted to him.
To him, because at the beginning of the story, she was very much like, these, what she called it, a sort of hellhole type thing.
Yes.
And she sort of was part of that whole discussion about, these people not being quite human, half human. And seeing and interacting with him, she's kind of like, well, he's different. She's sort of, she recognizes that he's not exactly like what her father is sort of depicting.
Yeah.
But also she's not saying, it's all subtext, isn't it?
Total subtext.
What she's saying, because she's not saying to that.
He's human, all right.
Yeah. She's not saying, he's very attractive.
Yeah, no, she's not saying that.
Yeah.
It's like,
he's going to be my husband.
No, I think in 1932 you can't be so on the nose if you're a girl. You had to be coy.
But I don't think her dad even got that. I think he picked up on that little.
Yeah. So then the most outlandish part of the film is when the expedition party gets kidnapped by a group of African dwarves and taken to their village. The interesting part is that all the dwarves are male and acted by blacked up little people. And then, I mean, what did you make of that?
To be honest, I laughed because it was just so ridiculous. And at first I was like looking and thinking, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Is that, is there anyone who, looks like they might really be black? And then I realised actually none of them are.
Exactly. I think they literally borrowed them from, what's it called? To Follow the Yellow Brick Road. What was that?
Oh, The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. But there's probably the same cast that put them to play the dwarves.
I know. It's just... It's really insulting to those actors
insulting.
As well.
It's
to those
completely...
actors. That they are... I mean, are they called pygmies in this, or do they say they're not pygmies? I think...
I don't know if they're trying to be pygmies. Hold on. I don't know if they're actually supposed to be pygmies. But I know it's not even... it's not politically correct to call them pygmies. The tribe where little people come from in Africa, or they're smaller, they're not actual little people, they're just more
small in stature.
Small in stature. They're from, there's a area between Uganda, Rwanda and Congo, and they're called the Twa people.
Okay.
In I think in Uganda. But there's variations of them.
I think what I remember from the film is that they are, somebody says pygmies, but then somebody says, no, they're dwarves.
Okay, so I think really that's bizarre.
But I just think it's so insulting to black people, the whole setup of what that scene and and what they're, but also to, people with dwarfism, just... Completely. As a kind of like, again, as a spectacle, this whole film is just about the kind of pleasing and the kind of base nature of an audience.
Completely.
Like a circus, like they're circus freaks or something like that. And it's just...
apart from the fact
that scene was horrible, actually.
Yeah, it was really horrible. And apart from the fact it makes no biological sense because the tribe's got only men.
Yeah, well, as we see in some situations, only men do, women might be in the hut somewhere.
Yeah.
Not seen, no children. Again, as I say, this story is so simplistic that there's no time or room. Nobody actually has thought about a narrative that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all about, like we said earlier, you just got bits of scenes just plonked together to make an entertaining
exactly. So
story.
It's just a new twist in the action saga.
It's just another thing. It's like, oh, that spectacle. People are going to go home to, oh, do you remember that scene where, these people, and this massive beast and, it's just, and also like the scenes with Tarzan swimming, Cheetah having his little action moment, as well. It's the scenes with Tarzan swimming, are completely
random
and unnecessary. And
it's just because Johnny Weissmuller
was a swimming champion.
He was. I think he might have even been an Olympic champion, but I know he was a really big, a famous swimmer. So they just thought, then let's throw in him swimming.
Yeah.
And Cheetah being Cheetah. Yeah. Then we could just throw it into the film.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing is basically, all those scenes are just like set pieces.
Yeah.
So that an audience can see something entertaining within that scene, I think.
Yeah, but also the subtext, okay? So they've blacked up these little people.
Yeah.
But why portray them as savages? Do you see? So they kidnap them, they make them savages, but the tribe could have been helping them, saying, you're going the wrong way or whatever. But
because it's that sort of danger, it's an action adventure. These are the stories that, people have probably read to their kids at bedtime of this dark, crazy continent, because that's what it is. It's venturing into this dark continent that is unexplored and full of, people with tails and, all kinds of crazy stories. And I think this is just part of that. None of the audience will have been to Africa.
No.
None of the filmmakers probably had ever been to Africa. So all they know are these kind of, these fantastical stories. And actually, Hollywood is about fantastical things.
Yeah.
You've got you're bringing together the circus, you're bringing together mythology of all kinds of things together to titillate an audience, and that's what it's doing. It's kind of giving them what they expect.
Yeah. The expedition is thrown into a pit with a gorilla, and they now have to fight their way out. There's loads of hilarious scenes in that.
And that gorilla was like 1 million feet tall with the smallest head and just kind of very strange looking.
Yeah, but notice all the African people who are thrown into the pit, they get killed by the gorilla, but somehow the Europeans survive.
Fodder.
Yeah.
Fodder.
That's correct.
They
That's
are
correct.
just easy pickings.
Exactly. So Tarzan comes to the rescue and kills the gorilla, but now they still have to deal with the dwarves. And how does he do that? He does his primal scream, and he summons an elephant herd with his scream.
That's right.
And it tramples the...
But didn't Cheetah... Is that the point where before that Cheetah had been... Or am I thinking of something slightly earlier where Cheetah had done his running through the jungle trying to get help?
Exactly. But this was when they'd just been thrown into the pit.
Yeah.
So he goes to collect Tarzan. That's his bit.
Yeah.
To Cheetah.
Oh, yes, that's right.
He goes to collect...
Yes, he goes to collect Tarzan.
Yeah.
And, he has his little action-adventure moment.
Exactly.
This poor chimpanzee. Thank God for the laws.
Exactly.
Protecting animals, because that was just...
But then, check this. So he Tarzan, when he arrives, he rescues only the European members of the expedition party. I mean, he doesn't even rescue Cheetah.
Well, but we've seen Cheetah doing his own little thing. He knows, he's strong. He can get out. By the way, do we know he's called Cheetah?
I think he's called Cheetah, yeah.
Does
I think
somebody
the film
say...
refers to him as Cheetah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Because I sort of wondered, how did Tarzan know how to speak? But anyway. Too complicated.
Yeah.
Cheetah, I mean, it is... But it's kind of, again, what people, expect. If he starts helping the natives,
then that means they're on a level. Then
they're not worthy of being saved. They've already been described as being inhuman, and and also I think it sort of shows Tarzan is really, it's in his genes to be a European. To be of course he's in its genes to be European. But what I mean is it's in his, something ingrained, I guess, in his psyche that means that he will automatically side with his people of his own type.
Yeah. And he knows that despite having grown up with an ape family.
Yes, with things that are not even people.
Yeah.
Although he will save his ape family.
Yeah, he would save the ape family.
He protects his ape family, but he won't protect the black people.
No, he won't, and he doesn't. And also, poor
and in fact, doesn't he kill one at one point?
He drowns him. He does a one-arm drowning.
He drowns somebody
because he was annoyed that his family member had been killed.
Yeah.
And he knew it was by an expedition member.
Yeah.
And he drowns, but also to reinforce that he's racially superior. He drowns him with only one arm.
Right. Yeah. To show his strength.
Yeah.
And then also, I don't know whether he would have known who killed the relative, but it felt like he was just picking anybody.
Yeah.
Maybe a straggler.
Yeah.
And just to kind of take his vengeance out on them.
Yeah.
But again, you also, in the scenes leading up to the end, you get, the attack on the river where the crocodile drowns a black man.
Yeah. And none of the white party is drowned.
No.
Again, the black people are the expendables. So that's something we dealt with in the first series.
Yeah.
It's always the black people who...
And I do think, because the story only has 3 central European characters who are essential to the story, there is nobody else to kill off. Mm-hmm. To show the danger of the wildlife and, Tarzan's revenge and whatever. There is nobody else. If Dad or Harry are killed at any of, in those, in place of those people, you wouldn't have anyone left in the story.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and they were not going to go into the African characters at all. They're not going to, they don't even get a voice.
No.
So, does James Parker find the elephant graveyard? You have to watch Tarzan the Ape Man to find out. But the whole concept of a European living in Africa and ruling over native Africans was quite a theme in the 1930s and throughout the early part of Hollywood. There's the footage from the People Safari we saw in part 1 were left over from a film called Trader Horn, shot in 1931. And that was about an expedition looking for a long-lost tribe. And then they discover a European queen living in the jungle.
As one does.
As one does in the 1930s. But then you also had 1984 film, Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, which was about European geologists looking for healing earth who are killed, and their daughter is brought up by a shaman and learns to communicate with animals and saves the community from corrupt Africans. And that's based on the 1930s comic. And of course, Tarzan's had loads of remakes, and most recent one being The Legend of Tarzan in 2016 with Alex Skarsgård. So why do you think this is a recurring theme? The European person who goes to rule over a whole lot of people in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, without having seen a lot of these films, I'm not sure what new ground they're treading.
I think, if I remember, I think I did see a bit of The Legend of Tarzan on a flight, and definitely the Africans in this latest version, they get more. They've got more agency.
Right. I do remember seeing Greystoke. With Christopher Lambert.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a big movie.
Yeah,
that was massive.
Yeah. And I wish I'd seen it for this, but I do know, because obviously he comes back to England.
Yeah.
And then returns to Africa, doesn't he?
Because he was in a massive castle and doesn't like it, and then goes back to Africa.
Which I think obviously tells you a lot, shows how the thinking has moved on. That, this kind of aristocratic, very civilized, supposedly very civilized sort of institution is not the be-all and end-all, and he's happy to give that up to many places. So
how do you think that, because there's probably, Tarzan probably get a remake again one day, but how do you think they'd remake it now?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it would have to be something that really explores the story from a psychological point of view, and takes, makes it a character-based story in a way that Greystoke did. But you'd have to see the real sort of need. It's one of these things. Would you sort of update it and bring it into a bit more a kind of contemporary world? Yeah,
but it was an interesting movie. I really enjoyed it because it's what I liked about it is the honesty of the racism is really earnest, and and I thought it's like being on a fly on the wall, and you hear people really telling
what they think
exactly, and it's nice because
it's shameless.
It's no illusions.
Yeah. But I do think there's something in it where it is a kind of a little bit self-aware. That there are parts of it, but I, it's very clunky, and it's it did very well. I think at the time, I think it's the top one in the top 10 of films in 1932.
Totally, and also it had a franchise. So by the time you've made 3 or 4 films with the actors, it shows that people wanted to see more and more of it. Yeah.
Do you know what? I do wonder if it developed because I don't remember seeing any of the Johnny Weissmuller versions. I'm assuming he was in
about 4 or 5 of them.
Okay, it would be interesting to see how those kind of subsequent films with Johnny Weissmuller, how they progressed, if there were any changes to the attitudes
towards the
Africans. Did it? I'm assuming it's probably spanned. Probably maybe 10 years more than that.
Yeah.
And did any sort of points of view change? Perspectives change?
Yeah, that would be interesting because remember we're going into World War II. So by the end of World War II, people are a bit uncomfortable with being so strident about racial superiority.
Yeah.
So and then also you're coming on to the independence movements has definitely started by then.
Yeah.
So I should imagine the way the Tarzan developed. It would be interesting to see how that happened.
I might try and watch a couple more just out of my own curiosity.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of Hollywood Africans. I hope you enjoyed our journey through Tarzan the Ape Man. But you can continue this conversation on Facebook, X, Instagram and Threads. We'll be back next week. I'm Barbara Angopa.
I'm Amaka Ugwunkwo.
Bye, until next time.
Bye-bye.